who was crazy until they were right all along. Asterisk asterisk Ludwig Boltzmann asterisk asterisk. His equations and formulas explained the physical properties of matter, but as it went against the then accepted laws of physics, he was ridiculed and ignored for years while fighting for atom theory to be accepted. He took his own life just 3 years before Ernest Rutherford discovered the nucleus of an atom, proving Boltzmann's theory. In the days of landlines, my phone was tapped. I could hear a strange hollow sound, and I knew someone was listening. I had had a bad accident, and was home for almost a year, and involved in a lawsuit. I told my attorney about it. He told me the insurance company wouldn't bother. I mentioned it to my roommate. She told me I was crazy. I began to notice a van parked on my street. It was there for several days. I thought I was under surveillance. My attorney and my roommate said I was crazy. A person came to my door asking questions about the neighborhood. They claimed to be from a real estate company. They didn't go to other houses. I thought I was being watched. My attorney and my roommate said I was crazy. Several weeks later, my roommate's boyfriend was arrested for stealing physical and intellectual property from IBM. It was the beginning of the tech era, and he stole millions in hardware and software and ideas. We were being watched to see if we were involved. The phone was tapped. We were under surveillance. We were taped. I wasn't crazy after all. Hemingway, before he took his life, he became extremely paranoid the FBI was following him. His wife and people around him just thought he was mentally ill and grew deeply concerned. Hemingway went as far as getting electrotherapy at a psychiatric hospital to try and help with the perceived delusions. Turns out the FBI had been following and bugging him for years according to declassified files. Courtney Love was warning everyone about Harvey Weinstein back in the mid-90s, but everyone just wrote her off. If you're a woman in this industry and Weinstein invites you to one of his parties, don't go. That dude, who suggested that it might be a good idea to wash your hands before performing surgery, the dingo ate my baby. Lady. Got made fun of constantly, most notably in Seinfeld, and I believe went to jail because nobody believed her. Turns out a dingo ate her baby. She is still made fun of. J. Harlan Bretts. He was a geologist that in the 1920s came up with a theory about why the dry falls and surrounding scablands of eastern Washington state were so sharp and abrupt, instead of smooth as should be with the general understanding of erosion. Especially since the falls have no real river to speak of to create erosion. His theory was that a giant flood, created by an even more massive lake, ripped through the region millions of years ago, reshaping the landscape in a matter of days. He was laughed at and discredited in the geology community for almost 50 years. Until someone discovered evidence in the 1950s of an ancient and massive lake that started just north of Montana that stretched all the way to southern Utah. The lake was believed to have been created by glacial dams, ice walls, during the last ice age. It would fill up over thousands of years, and then hit a point where a glacial dam broke, and the lake water would fire out the break like a water cannon, drain the lake, and reshape an entire region over several days as the water flowed toward the ocean. This happened several times. Since the flood that carved the dry falls likely started from the Lake Missoula area in modern-day Montana, it was named the Great Missoula Flood. Bretts was given an award in 1979 for his contribution to geology when he was 96 years old. He joked, "All my enemies are dead, so I have no one to gloat over." Edit. Fixed name. Edit 2. Oh my goodness everyone, thanks for all the upvotes and awards. I had no idea this would turn into such a popular post. For a very long time the medical community thought that stomach ulcers were caused by stress. A doctor in Australia called Barry Marshall claimed they were wrong, and that they were caused by an excess of certain bacteria, and the cure was simple antibiotics. The medical community ridiculed him, and nearly ended his career. He eventually decided the only way to prove he was right was to infect himself, develop the ulcers, and cure himself. In curing himself he was proved right, and won the Nobel Prize for his efforts, and now stomach ulcers are very easily treatable. They previously affected 1 in 10 people. And #X200B. Full story here. https://www.discovermagazine.com/health/ The Doctor Who drank infectious broth gave himself an ulcer and solved a medical mystery. https://www.discovermagazine.com/health/ The Doctor Who drank infectious broth gave himself an ulcer and solved a medical mystery. Harry Marco Polo spent 10 years trying to convince everyone, investors, journalists, regulatory agencies, etc., that Bernie Madoff was a fraud, based on forensic accounting. Madoff was one of the most respected names on Wall Street, and despite the overwhelming evidence, no one was willing to entertain the thought he might be running a Ponzi scheme. Harry's book, No One Would Listen is a pretty great account of financial detective work, and just the abject frustration of being absolutely certain you're right, but no one believes you. Edit. If you want to see Congressman Ackerman absolutely destroy the SEC right after Markopoulos's testimony, here you go. https://www.youtube.com/watch=3z11cq0qme. Johnny Rotten said in an interview that he knew Jimmy Savile was into all kinds of seediness. People dismissed it as typical Johnny Rotten anti-establishment talk, for which he is famous. As it turned out, he was right. Yeah, I know, Piers Morgan. https://www.youtube.com/watch=v40990. In 1912 the meteorologist Alfred Wegener described what he called continental drift, an idea that culminated 50 years later in the modern theory of plate tectonics. 40. Wegener expanded his theory in his 1915 book The Origin of Continents and Oceans. 41. Starting from the idea, also expressed by his forerunners, that the present continents once formed a single landmass, later called Pangaea, Wegener suggested that these separated and drifted apart, likening them to icebergs of low-density granite floating on a sea of denser basalt. 42. Supporting evidence for the idea came from the dovetailing outlines of South America's east coast and Africa's west coast, and from the matching of the rock formations along these edges. Confirmation of their previous contiguous nature also came from the fossil plants Glossopteris and Gangamopteris, and the therapsid, or mammal-like reptile Lystrosaurus, all widely distributed over South America, Africa, Antarctica, India, and Australia. The evidence for such an erstwhile joining of these continents was patent to field geologists working in the southern hemisphere. The South African Alex du Toit put together a mass of such information in his 1937 publication Our Wandering Continents, and went further than Wegener in recognizing the strong links between the Gondwana fragments. Wegener's work was initially not widely accepted, in part due to a lack of detailed evidence. The Earth might have a solid crust and mantle and a liquid core, but there seemed to be no way that portions of the crust could move around. Distinguished scientists, such as Harold Jeffreys and Charles Schuchert, were outspoken critics of continental drift. When the Civil War broke out, everyone on both sides thought it would be a quick victory. However, Sherman kept saying it would be a bloodbath that would drag on for years. His superiors decided he was insane, and sent him out west to fight Indians, Native Americans, just to get rid of him. After it all came true, and they needed some better generals, They said maybe we should bring back that Sherman guy, Martha Mitchell. She was the wife of Nixon's AG, John Mitchell. She was outspoken in the extreme, and was one of the first to talk openly about what really happened re-Watergate. Since she was also known to love her martinis, she was widely written off as a drunk, crazy woman. Behind the scenes, a White House doctor began heavily sedating her, and her husband locked her away from the press. No one believed her until Nixon resigned, and the story came out. To this day, most people only remember her as that loudmouth, Martha Mitchell.